Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Childcare Bridge podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your childcare center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Childcare Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Childcare Bridge. Today's topic boils everything down for you to give you the one area that you need to focus on at your center. So all day, every day, in working with center owners of all different sizes, we're talking through challenges all day long. Challenges from enrollments to licensing, staffing, cash flow, acquisitions, forecasting, directors taking enrollments and going to new locations, one-star reviews, PR disasters. Like all day, every day, there are things coming at you left and right. I get it. I've been there in that spot, and in many days, that is me as well. It's that whole notion that you need to be in firefighting mode. But what I started to realize was that there is one thing that can start to help me solve everything else. And the simple answer is cash. When I have cash in the bank, when I have cash that is getting ready to come in, I can forecast it out and see, great, XYZ is happening, so there's going to be an influx here. When I have reserves, I can leverage that cash to move the needle faster. And I've talked a lot about this concept of who, not how. I've read thousands of books on business, thousands. I still devour typically 2 to 4 books every single week. Like I'm cranking, I'm listening to audiobooks like all the time. Like in the morning, brushing my teeth, I've got an audiobook on. So I'm just trying to always fill my brain with more insights. And in particular, I like to listen to areas that I'm trying to solve at the time. So I might dive into one particular area. I might look at, great, I want to solve some hiring stuff this week, so let's grab 5 or 6 books and let's devour all those on how to hire more effectively. And just as a simple example. But this notion of cash is then allowing me to hire my who's. It's allowing me to speed things up. Most of you get into this zone where you feel like you have to do every single thing yourself. You feel like you have to learn how to do whatever it is. Marketing being a big example, which we're going to spend the lion's share of this episode on. Well, I need to understand how to do paid traffic and Facebook ad buying and keyword research and writing search engine friendly blogs. I need to know how to blast my email list, and that's just the marketing side. All these things you feel like you have to learn to do. The problem is that you are the expert in only a couple of areas. You might have a broad scope of knowledge, but when you really boil it down, there's only going to be a couple of areas that you are better than everyone else at, and you enjoy doing those things the most. For most owners of centers, they hate hiring. They absolutely hate it. I can tell you that I don't love hiring either. We have people issues just like you do, not every day, but every single week, I would say. I don't love doing it. I'm not the best at it. But what I've started to realize very rapidly is that we can then go and find the right who if there is cash in the bank and we're not having to massively stretch. Now, there are some things that I might have to finance over X amount of time. And I can roll the dice and know that that's going to help. For example, we've recently wanted to continue to up-level our internal systems. We've deployed an operating methodology called EOS, and it has been working okay, but not to the level that we wanted. And I started digging in, and then I caught myself in the weeds, trying to solve this and figure out the how, when instead the answer was a who. So if you know that who's can help you solve all your challenges, they can help you solve your hiring challenges, your financial questions and forecasting and bookkeeping, marketing, acquisitions. But if you know that you need to have some capital, you need to have some reserves, and you need to be in a place where if this doesn't magically transform whatever you're trying to accomplish in 30 days, you're not going to be on the streets. And there are far too many centers that they can't even afford to invest $5,000 in something because they're running so lean isn't even the right word. They're just running so close to break even or even a small loss that they can't get out of that cycle. So how do you solve it? So if you know it cash, okay, great. It's not going to fall out of a tree magically for you. So how do you solve the cash issue so that you then can go and hire and engage the right who's that then can help you solve all of your other challenges? Simple answer is marketing. Everything that I teach you has a marketing first mentality. Now, some people might say, well, Michael, isn't that selfish of you? You run a marketing agency. I do run a marketing agency, but I also run a business that helps with recruiting, systems, teams, operations, and even a bookkeeping and financial advisory firm. So we cover all the different areas. But if I look at why I am always telling you to focus on the marketing first, that is going to create the cash that is then going to allow you to invest in these who's. So now that I've hopefully kind of painted the picture, you need the right who's. You need people that are most likely of a higher caliber than you have been hiring in the past. The $300 a month bookkeeper probably isn't doing you a great service. Not to say that they're not, but if you're a 7-figure and wanting to become an 8-figure center, a $300 bookkeeper is going to produce $300 results. So we solve that by focusing in on how do we make sure that your marketing is dominating, firing on every cylinder possible. How do we do that? Before we look at tactics, we need to get crystal clear on a metric that a lot of center owners do not understand. And that is, what is the lifetime value of one enrollment? What's the LTV, lifetime value of one enrollment? Now, usually the first answer I get is, oh, I don't know. I have no clue how long people stay. The nice thing with this industry is you are required to keep ridiculous records. You're required to know how many days people are there for, how long they've stayed, when they enrolled, when they disenrolled, when they left, when they graduated. You're required to have most of these records very handy at your fingertips. So your first homework assignment from today's episode is to look back at the last 3 to 5 years. But so, my gosh, that's a ton of time. Hear me out as to why I'm looking for that amount of time. So 3 to 5 years, I want you to look at and start to jot down the enrollments, and you're going to look for a few things. Number one, how many enrollments? So let's say January 5 years ago. How many did you have? Okay, great. I had 50 enrollments. Okay, great. How many of those were full-time equivalent, part-time equivalent? So start to get those numbers. And then what I'm looking for you to do, depending on the system you're using, this could be something that takes you 30 minutes, could be something that takes you 30 days. But I'm looking for you then to follow each of those enrollments based on their age to see how long they stayed. So great. And let's even round the math up to make it a little bit more easy to compute. So you had 100 enrollments, and you start to look at the ages, and they range from infants to toddler. You've got some that are at 4, so you start to average all that stuff out, and you're going to follow it. Great. So if they came in as an infant, how many infants did you have? When did that infant decide to leave? Did they stay for 6 months? Did they stay for 5 years? And you're going to do that for your different enrollments. So you want to start doing this for all those enrollments. And what you're going to start to find are trends. January, we had 100, and then they're all broken down. And then you start to figure out, when did they leave? How long did they stay? And you're going to very rapidly start to find some averages. And I'm not looking for this to be totally perfect down to the number of days, but I'm looking for initially some broad stroke estimates. Now, I'll give you the answer that you should be getting very close towards, and that historically is on average between 25 and 30 months. Now, you might only serve pre-K as an example. There are not a ton of centers that only do pre-K, but your average might only be 10 months, or if they stay for summer camp, 12 months. But you need to get those numbers as a baseline. When you have that baseline, now you can start to deploy marketing math. And everything from here becomes a very simple math equation. So let's say you figure out your average is 20 months. The average family over the last couple of years has stayed 20 months. Some maybe left after 3 months, some stayed for 4 years, 5 years, 3 years, but it's 20 months is the magic number that you start to find. The average is what you're looking for. You're always going to have outliers. Some that came in, they stayed for 1 day. So you're looking for the average. You're then going to take that number and you're going to multiply it by your tuition. And so, well, Michael, we have different tuitions, they're for different ages and all of that good stuff. Well, if you know the average is 20 months, then let's say you're averaging, they're going to come in from 3 to 5 years old, as an example. You're able to kind of play with that a little bit and then look at your tuition. So you've got your infant rates, you've got your pre-K rates, you're averaging this stuff out. So let's say for simplicity, 20 months, $1,000 a month. So that one enrollment is worth $20,000 to your center, $20,000. Now, the piece that you also need to keep in mind is that historically, on average, they're going to either refer and or have other kids from their family or their immediate family, their siblings, etc. And they're typically going to have another 3 to 5 direct relationships with people that end up enrolling. So if you look at it from a purely number standpoint, you're going to be getting on average $20,000 over 2 years. The icing on the cake is those 3, 4, 5 or more additional enrollments. Let's say they send one enrollment, and that's your average that you figure out. Well, I would argue that one enrollment then is worth $40,000. But I like to have that as like the icing on the cake, like that's the extra benefit of providing really great service. But if you start to become hyper aware, let's say on the high side, everyone is referring 5 people to your center. Like you can start to trace that and realize, well, yeah, everyone, they're sending a lot of people. Then I would start to argue the case that that one enrollment is not worth $20,000 to you. It's worth $120,000 because you're going to get 5 enrollments, $20,000 each, and they're $20,000. So if you start to think about it that way, you can now back into what do your enrollment numbers need to look like for you to be producing the amount of cash that can allow you to accomplish and just execute all those things that you've been talking about. You back into those numbers. We're currently here. We want to get to here. Great. So we need to get 30 more equivalent full-time enrollments. And we know that those 30 of them, they're worth at least $20,000 over 2 years. Now, I'm not saying you should then invest $10,000 to get one new enrollment. Not what I'm saying. But if you're getting concerned over investing $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month in marketing, so you're telling me that you have a problem of 30 enrollments. You need to close the gap on 30. And we came to an agreement that each enrollment is worth $20,000 over 2 years. So the way that I would look at it is I have a $600,000 problem. I need to close the gap on $600,000. And that's how my brain starts to think of it, because now I'm not like, well, geez, I'm trying to solve a $600,000 problem by investing $1,000 a month in marketing. The numbers don't start to add up. They don't. You're looking to solve a gigantic financial problem that can then help you escalate. And it's not even just the 600,000. What are those projects that you're then going to be working on that are going to help you advance the center further? So maybe one of those problems that you're looking to solve is an acquisition. So when you're really looking at it, yes, you're looking to solve a $600,000 problem over 2 years. What's it going to take by way of number of leads, number of tours, and you're backing into all of this stuff. Now, this might sound complicated, but I promise you it's really not. It's just doing some simple math. But then when you look at it, you're then able to break it down and start to see, okay, great. we've got to get these tour numbers up. And we're trying to close that gap over 2 years. We're trying to produce the extra capital. So now we're more profitable. That extra capital then allows us to invest in a who that's going to help acquire another center, expand, free up a couple of classrooms, whatever you're aiming to accomplish, which then produces more capital. But it boils down to having the capital to begin with. And the answer isn't to go and just take out more loans. I use debt all the time for growth. But I can tell you that the better and easier option is for me to know how much a customer is worth, figure out how much I'm willing to invest to acquire that customer, and then make sure that we're putting the marketing behind the results, marketing behind all the efforts that then ultimately drive those results. That's the secret sauce. If you focus on your marketing, you focus on driving more leads, producing more tours, now your enrollment numbers start to go up. You're starting to be more profitable. In turn, I would highly encourage you to listen to my podcast on pricing. The chances are pretty high that you are undercharging. So if you're driving new enrollments, driving lots of new leads, and you start to raise your prices, it's game over in a good way. That will start to reduce the cash. The cash then allows you to hire the who's. Practice this concept of who, not how, but execute it because you're focusing on marketing. Marketing produces the cash. The cash allows you to hire. Take some action, get out there, figure out your average lifetime value, and then start to figure out what are you willing to do to solve X size of a problem. And most of your problems are not $5,000 problems. The smallest problem that I've ever seen is a $100,000 problem. So what are you willing to invest to solve that? Get out there, take that action. Michael Tasner signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.